Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this comforting expectation of precision, you know?
Right. You want a clear answer.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an x-ray, and you see that jagged white line right there on the screen.
It's binary. Broken or not broken.
Yeah. The doctor just points at it and says, you know, there it is. You apply a test, problem solved. But, well, when you step into the world of social history, into like the actual anatomy of systemic collapse, suddenly that x-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Oh, completely. The diagnostic landscape is, well, it's terrifyingly murky.
It really is. I mean, you're looking at a society, a civilization, right?
Yeah.
A massive economic structure, and the fractures simply aren't visible on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
To the average person, everything looks absolutely fine.
The markets are humming.
Right. The elite are throwing these lavish parties, the architecture is stunning, the quarterly reports are breaking records, but, and this is what we're getting into today, underneath all of that superficial gloss, the bone is completely shattered.
It's powder.
Yeah. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a 1,400-year-old text that outlines exactly how societies fracture while the elite are, you know, still popping champagne.
It's a fascinating text.
It is. We're going to strip away all the cultural and religious mythologies surrounding Surah Ar-Ra'd, specifically verses 31 through 35, and we're going to look at it purely as an economic stress test.
A brilliantly sophisticated blueprint for social physics and economic longevity, really.
Yeah.
Just written in the vocabulary of antiquity.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. The linguistic choices in this specific text offer, well, basically a masterclass in macroeconomic diagnosis, right?
Oh, absolutely. We are presented with a historical scenario that is practically a mathematical constant across human history. It's the confrontation between an entrenched status quo and a reformer who is proposing a new paradigm.
The classic clash.
Right. So the text draws us right into the concept of the mockers. This is verse 32. A reformer arrives. In the historical context, we're talking about the prophet, and he proposes a socioeconomic system built on equity.
Sustainable laws.
Sustainable laws, yeah. And the aggressive dismantlement of elite monopolies.
Right.
And what's the immediate reaction of the power brokers? The entrenched civilization.
The laugh.
They laugh. The Arabic term used here is istisa, which it denotes a very specific kind of systemic ridicule.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Systemic ridicule.
Yeah, it's the weaponization of absurdity to protect a fragile monopoly.
Well, hold on. I need to push back on that interpretation right out of the gate.
Go ahead.
You say they use mockery because they have no logical counter-arguments, but, I mean, historically speaking, the elites do have arguments. They don't just laugh in a vacuum, right?
True. They have their justifications.
Yeah, they point to their massive GDP. They point to their military conquests, their sprawling trade networks. For anyone listening, you can see this today. They genuinely believe the reformer is a fool because, from their perspective, they have the data of success right in front of them. So why frame it as intellectual bankruptcy?
That is a really vital distinction to make. They possess metrics, sure, but they absolutely do not possess sustainability models.
Oh, wow. Okay, say more about that.
Well, the power brokers look at their ledgers and they see immense wealth concentration, and they mistake that for systemic health.
Right. Rich equals healthy.
Exactly. So when the reformer introduces a paradigm shift, arguing that wealth built on exploitation or hoarding is mathematically destined to collapse, the elite realize they cannot win the long-term mathematical argument.
Because they can't.
Right. They can't prove their system will survive a multi-generational stress test. So Atisa kicks in. Because when you can't defeat the logic of a sustainable system, your only recourse is to make the advocate of that system look socially ridiculous.
It's a defense mechanism.
Precisely. It is a psychological buffer. It's designed to insulate the masses from realizing the elite have no actual long-term survival strategy.
It's like, okay, it's like flipping the chessboard when you realize you're 5 moves away from checkmate.
That is exactly what it is.
You don't have a counter move on the board, so you just attack the premise of the game itself. You mock the person sitting across from you. But, you know, the text captures something even more insidious than just laughter. The mockers point to their palaces and their apparent invulnerability, and they ask this highly provocative question. Basically, if your new paradigm is the absolute truth and our system is as corrupt and hollow as you claim, then why hasn't the sky fallen on us yet?
Why are we still rich?
Exactly. Why are we still rich?
Which brings us to the socioeconomic concept of molat, or the respite.
The respite.
Yes, this is the ultimate trap of the status quo. The elites mistake their temporary comfort for permanent stability. They operate under the delusion that if systemic collapse is not instantaneous, then the collapse must not be real.
Right, like if the roof didn't cave in today, the house must be fine.
Right. And the underlying mechanics of Molat can be best understood through the physics of momentum. So imagine a massive, multi-thousand-ton freight train.
Barreling down the tracks at like 80 miles an hour.
Exactly. A completely self-contained, roaring mechanical beast. Now, imagine a mechanism suddenly, cleanly severs the coupling between the engine and the rest of the train cars.
Okay, so the engine pulls away.
Yes. What actually happens to those disconnected cars? Do they just defy physics and freeze dead on the tracks the millisecond the engine is detached?
Of course not. I mean, they're carrying thousands of tons of forward kinetic energy.
Exactly.
Depending on the incline of the tracks, they might roll forward for miles.
They coast on residual momentum. And the mockers, those elite power brokers, they're sitting in the dining car of those uncoupled trains.
Oh, man. Drinking fine wine.
Drinking fine wine, looking out the window at the scenery flying by. And they're pointing to the blur of the trees as proof that they are still making progress.
They're saying, look at our speed. The reformer was wrong. We're moving forward.
Yes, they fundamentally mistake residual momentum for a functioning engine. They don't realize the actual moral and economic engine driving sustainable progress has been severed. The eventual halt, the crash, is an unavoidable mathematical certainty dictated by the friction of the tracks. The moat, the respite, is merely the distance they're allowed to coast before the friction overcomes the momentum.
That is a terrifying lens to apply to modern history. I mean, if you're listening to this, think about it. We look at corporate structures or geopolitical empires today, and they seem utterly untouchable because they're moving so fast.
We assume they are generating their own power.
Right. But the reality is they might just be coasting on the momentum of innovations or resources they exploited decades ago.
Decades or even centuries.
The fatal error, the severing of the engine could have happened 20 years ago, and we are just living in the lag time. The text frames this as the law of sowing and reaping, doesn't it?
It does. Natural law dictates a biological and physical time gap between sowing a seed and reaping the harvest. You plant an apple seed today, you understand that an orchard will not materialize by tomorrow morning.
Right, there's an inescapable biological lag.
Exactly. In social physics, systemic rot operates on the exact same principle. A systemic crash is never instantaneous. The molat is the lag time before the consequences of an unsustainable system physically materialize.
It's the years it takes for the rot to completely hollow out the heartwood of the tree.
Sometimes centuries.
So, okay, if the crash is written into the kind of years in advance, and the train is just, coasting toward an inevitable halt, how exactly is that code being written?
That's the core question.
Right. If the universe possesses this immutable law of sowing and reaping, where's the ledger? What tracks the friction? Because the train cars keep rolling, everything looks fine on the outside, so the decay must be happening somewhere invisible.
That inquiry leads us directly into the micro-level mechanics of societal decay. How does a system record its own downfall?
Okay.
The source text addresses this by introducing the concept of the internal monitor. It's often translated as a force standing over every soul for what it earned. This is verse 33.
I want to pause here and look at the architecture of this concept because this is where traditional interpretations go entirely off the rails.
They really do.
If you grew up in a traditional Orthodox environment, you're almost certainly picturing this monitor as a literal cosmic police officer.
An angel with a giant feather quill.
Yes. Sitting on a cloud, writing down every time you lie or cheat in this magical leather-bound ledger, just waiting to hand you a ticket at the end of time.
The analysis of this text thoroughly dismantles that mythological framework.
Yeah.
We are not dealing with a winged accountant here.
Right. So what is it?
What the text is describing is the inescapable cumulative impact of our own actions on our neural pathways and our social fabric. You are your own data recorder.
So the human being is basically a biological hard drive.
Exactly. The system doesn't require an external police officer because the internal monitor is flawlessly logging every single data point into your own psychology and into the societal structures you participate in.
That makes so much more sense.
Consider the Arabic term associated with this mechanism, makafat Amal.
Makafat Amal. Okay.
It is the natural law of cause and effect applied to human behavior. It's a double-entry bookkeeping system where the ledger is reality itself.
Wow.
Every time you engage in exploitation, every time an elite entity suppresses wages to inflate a stock price, a debit is recorded. Not in a mystical book in the sky, but in the psychological fabric of the workforce.
In the degradation of trust.
In the widening wealth gap. That data is permanently burned into the system.
Let's take that concept and apply it to the bizarre psychological blind spots of the modern world. Because humans possess an incredible grasp of physical laws, we understand them intimately.
We rely on them.
Right, like if you take a CEO and you seal him in a small room and pump that room full of toxic carbon monoxide gas, he will suffocate.
Math is math. Biology is biology.
Yeah, he doesn't try to negotiate with the gas. He doesn't hold up his quarterly earnings report and say, excuse me, I am a billionaire, therefore this carbon monoxide shouldn't bind to my hemoglobin. Physical laws are brutally egalitarian. But when it comes to moral or social laws, human beings immediately fall into this fallacy of dualism.
Explain how that dualism manifests for those listening.
It's the belief that you can separate your life into a private sphere and a public sphere, and that the universe somehow respects that boundary.
Ah, yes.
It's like a billionaire who notices the foundation of his private mansion is crumbling and sinking into the earth. But instead of fixing the foundation, he goes downtown and pays to have the exterior walls of the public library painted.
A classic PR move.
Right. He thinks, I can ruthlessly exploit my workers, I can hoard resources in secret, I can lie in my private dealings, but as long as I fund a public art museum, my society will remain stable.
He thinks he's balancing the scales.
Exactly. He thinks the universe, the physics of the building, cares about the fresh paint in public, while gravity is pulling down his rotten foundation in private.
The socioeconomic reality is that the universe absolutely refuses to recognize that artificial division. You simply cannot compartmentalize causality.
You can't.
The law of cause and effect, Makafeti Amal, does not care about a public relations strategy. If your internal system, your private actions, what the text refers to as the bakin, the unseen internal intentions, are built on exploitation, that toxic data is continuously being uploaded into the bedrock of your society.
It's just poisoning the well.
The society is systematically poisoning its own root system, regardless of how beautiful the leaves look on the outside.
And what I find fascinating is how the text actively mocks the lengths to which elites will go to bypass this natural accounting. I mean, throughout history, powerful people have tried to insert intermediaries into the equation.
Oh, constantly. They think they can bribe the universe.
Yes. The source text points out the sheer absurdity of worshiping an idol like a literal block of carved stone by noting that the idol can't even swat a fly off its own face.
It's a brilliant image.
It really is. Yet entire civilizations will build massive, complex lobbying systems, bureaucratic loopholes, religious superstitions, all of it designed to bribe their way out of systemic consequences.
It is the ultimate manifestation of systemic delusion. You can hire, the most expensive legal teams to find loopholes in your constitutional framework.
Oh, sure.
You can build the most ornate temples to signal your virtue, but you simply cannot bribe the internal neural and social consequences of your actions.
You can't lobby gravity.
Exactly. You cannot lobby gravity.
Uh-huh.
If the societal architecture is built on corrupt data, the collapse is not a matter of divine wrath. It is a matter of mathematical inevitability. The ledger always balances.
So, we have this terrifying combination. We have a society coasting on the momentum of uncoupled train cars, completely blind to the fact that their engine is gone. And simultaneously, they're secretly logging terabytes of toxic, corrupt data into their own social foundation through Makafeti Amal.
A recipe for disaster.
Right. The train is rolling, but the tracks are quietly being dismantled ahead of them. So, what exactly is the trigger? What forces the train to finally stop and the illusion to shatter?
The trigger is what the text frames as a systemic stress test. When the internal rot reaches a critical mass and it collides with a shifting external environment, momentum is no longer sufficient to sustain the illusion.
The collision of systems.
Yes.
This takes us into the core of social physics. The text visualizes this stress test through an incredibly powerful comparative metaphor, the inevitable collision between the end of the believers and the end of the rejectors.
And it maps this out using the analogy of the Tayyib tree versus the Kabbath tree.
Let's break this down.
So let's examine the architecture of the Kabbath system first. This is the corrupt, unstable system of the rejectors, the society built on sand.
Okay.
This is an infrastructure entirely uprooted from reality. It's driven by fleeting, short-term desires and the hoarding of immediate profits. But what is crucial to understand about a Kabbath system is not just that it is bad, but that it is profoundly, overwhelmingly exhausting to maintain.
Yes. Oh, the source material brings up an example that really caught me off guard at first.
The fasting example.
Yes. It describes a person performing a religious ritual fasting in blistering, scorching heat. They are exhausted, dehydrated, putting their body through immense physical stress.
Just suffering.
Just suffering. But it yields absolutely zero spiritual or social change because the underlying systemic paradigm is completely corrupt. Now, I have to admit, my initial reaction was, why are we talking about a guy fasting in the desert when we're supposed to be discussing macroeconomics?
Right, it seems disconnected.
But it's a metaphor for systemic emptiness, isn't it?
It is the perfect distillation of wasted societal energy. They are pouring water into a bucket that has no bottom.
Wow.
Think of how this translates to a corrupt modern economy. Think of the sheer volume of energy, capital, and human labor required just to prevent a fundamentally broken system from instantly collapsing.
Oh, it's staggering?
The massive bureaucratic red tape required to obfuscate where the money is going. The vast surveillance apparatus needed to keep an impoverished, unhappy populace in check.
The relentless 24/7 propaganda machine required to maintain the illusion of prosperity.
The endless financial bailouts, the patching of legislative loopholes, the elite in a kibith system are not relaxing. They are sprinting at maximum capacity on a treadmill just to maintain a broken status quo.
They're desperately trying to hold the sand together while the wind is picking up.
Precisely.
And the moment the environment shifts, like a sudden pandemic, a radical technological revolution, a massive supply chain failure, the sand shifts, the exhaustion overtakes them, and the entire structure implodes. There's no foundation to hold it.
Now contrast that structural fragility with the system built on bedrock. The Tayyib system.
A good tree.
This represents a pure, sustainable infrastructure. The text describes it as having roots that are firmly, unshakably established in the material earth. It does not ignore physical reality.
It's grounded.
It respects natural law, it relies on sound economic principles, it acknowledges human biology. Yet its branches reach high into the sky, which represents its alignment with lofty, permanent, universal values.
And the defining characteristic, the ultimate metric of success for this Tayyib tree, is that it provides fruit in every season.
Yes.
It doesn't care if it's a bull market or a bear market.
Precisely because it is not subject to the artificial boom and bust cycles that define the kibith tree. It is structurally sustainable. It yields continuous, reliable results regardless of the changing environmental weather.
Right.
And to understand why the Tayyib tree survives while the kibith tree starves, we have to look at how the text defines the fatal flaw of the corrupt system. The text uses the linguistic concept of kufr.
Hold on, let's drill deep into this term. Because if you ask 100 people on the street what kufr means, 99 of them are going to tell you it simply means disbelief or infidelity in a strictly religious theological sense.
Like a disagreement over dogma.
Exactly. But the expert analysis of this text reveals a profoundly different, fiercely economic reality behind the word.
The etymological root of kufr, specifically in the context of kufran and iman, means to actively cover, hide, or bury something.
Hide or bury.
In a socioeconomic context, it represents the active hiding, hoarding, and monopolizing of resources. It is the systemic act of taking the fruit of the society, locking it in a vault, and artificially restricting the supply to inflate its value for a select few.
Artificial scarcity.
Exactly. It is the exact structural opposite of the Tayyib tree, providing fruit in every season.
So kufr and iman is essentially the ancient vocabulary for rent-seeking behavior and wealth monopolization.
It absolutely is.
And the tragic irony detailed in the source is a lesson in macroeconomics that feels like it was written for today's geopolitical landscape. I mean, when a society hoards its blessings, when the top 1% concentrate all the wealth and suppress the wages of the working class, they genuinely believe they're securing their fortress.
They think they're building a moat.
Right. But what they are actually doing is transforming their own economy into a stagnant, rotting swamp.
It creates a crisis of velocity. A healthy economic system requires the continuous velocity of capital and resources. The kibith system, driven by the hoarding instinct of kufr and iman, chokes off that flow.
The water stops moving.
And the society becomes literally paralyzed. Goods sit in warehouses and rot. Technological advancements are deliberately suppressed because they threaten legacy monopolies. The vast majority of the population lacks the purchasing power to participate in the market, so demand plummets.
The society is just stuck. It cannot move forward because there's no thriving middle class to drive innovation, and it cannot move backward because the elite violently refuse to yield their monopolies.
It is a state of total systemic paralysis masquerading as immense wealth.
It's the uncoupled train cars finally grinding to a halt because the friction of severe inequality has finally overpowered the momentum of past innovations.
Beautifully put. So we have diagnosed the pathology of the collapse, we've observed the arrogance of the mockers, we understand the inescapable internal data recording of Makafati Amal, and we have witnessed the environmental stress test that inevitably shatters the hoarding society.
So what's next?
The logical progression requires us to ask, if the sustainable Tayyib tree survives this stress test, what is the actual output? What does a fully actualized, successful society look like when it operates in alignment with these natural laws?
Which brings us to verse 35, the concept of Jannat.
Nice.
Now, I need you listening to brace yourselves, because we are about to take a sledgehammer to a massive amount of cultural baggage.
A very necessary sledgehammer.
We have to aggressively, unapologetically dismantle the cartoonish, literal interpretations of heaven or Jannat that are so enthusiastically preached by modern traditionalists.
The mythological afterlife.
Yeah. The source text explicitly mocks the idea of literal rivers of milk and honey flowing through physical gardens. It sharply criticizes the reduction of ultimate universal human success to the idea of physical houris existing merely to serve patriarchal hedonistic desires in an afterlife theme park.
And we must understand why the text rejects that literalism. If we step back and look at the broader architectural framework of the text we have been analyzing, reducing the ultimate societal blueprint to a fantastical, sensual playground completely violates the intellectual rigor of everything leading up to it.
Right. We've been talking about systems.
Exactly. We have been discussing natural law, the physics of momentum, the velocity of capital, the psychological ledger of human actions. The text is operating on the cutting edge of social physics. To suddenly pivot to literal rivers of honey is a catastrophic failure of reading comprehension.
But I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Billions of people over centuries have read these texts and genuinely believed in the literal rivers and the physical gardens. If we are discarding that, are we just retroactively forcing modern economics into an ancient religious text to make it sound smart? Like, are we just retconning the mythology?
We are not retconning anything. We are finally reading the text in its stated context. The text itself provides the key to its own cipher by using a very specific word, mathal.
Mathal, which means...
This translates to allegory, parable, or representation. You have to consider the environment and the early human consciousness of the original audience. Human consciousness, especially in antiquity, could not easily grasp highly abstract, elevated macroeconomic and sociological truths.
I mean, try explaining the velocity of capital to someone in the 7th century.
Exactly. If you try to explain psychological security to a 7th century desert nomad, the concepts will fail to land. Therefore, the text uses concrete, highly desirable physical allegories to map out a higher socioeconomic reality.
It uses the language of the immediately tangible to explain the profound intangible.
Precisely.
Okay, let's decode the blueprint using that cipher. The verse describes Jannat as a place with rivers flowing beneath it. If we remove the literal landscaping, what is a river in the context of social physics? A river is a continuous, uninterrupted, life-giving flow of a vital resource.
In an economic framework, rivers flowing beneath it represents a closed-loop economic system.
A closed loop.
It is the absolute blueprint for universal resource access. In a truly sustainable society, the foundational infrastructure, the beneath, is designed so that sustenance, purchasing power, and basic resources flow continuously to all citizens without interruption.
The flow of capital is not dammed up by monopolies.
No, it nourishes the roots of the entire societal tree. It is the precise, engineered antidote to the hoarding of Kufaninamat.
A closed-loop system where universal access is baked into the very soil of the society. I love how grounded that is. And then the verse layers on two more specific conditions: permanent shade and permanent fruit.
Let's unpack permanent shade first.
Okay. If you are standing in the blistering, lethal heat of the desert, which is the physical environment of the original audience, shade isn't just a nice place for a picnic.
Not at all.
Shade represents absolute survival. It represents relief, safety, and the cessation of panic.
Translating that into our social physics framework, permanent shade, Zulu Adem, translates directly to total psychological security.
Psychological security, that is the holy grail of human existence.
Consider the underlying reality of modern economic structures. The greatest, most corrosive element in contemporary society is not poverty itself, but systemic anxiety.
Oh, without a doubt.
The chronic terror of losing your job, the looming threat of insurmountable medical debt, the anxiety of living through volatile boom and bust cycles.
It eats people alive.
It does. A society operating under the permanent shade of a Tayyib system is a society structurally freed from this chronic terror. The citizens know unequivocally that the baseline of their existence is secure. The system shields them from the scorching heat of random economic devastation.
And because the population possesses that permanent psychological security, the society is capable of producing permanent fruit, the ukuluha.
Yes.
This represents unceasing economic and intellectual sustainability. Think about what happens to human potential when people are no longer operating in a constant state of fight-or-flight survival panic.
When basic resources are flowing universally, innovation explodes.
The tree produces fruit in every season. The economy isn't a fragile, speculative bubble waiting to burst. It is rooted in reality, producing consistent, equitable value year after year.
Finally, we must address the concept of hur, which has suffered perhaps the most profound distortion.
Oh, absolutely. The source material definitively clarifies this.
Right. It clarifies that hur does not refer to mythical, submissive physical maidens. Linguistically, the term is entirely gender neutral.
Gender neutral.
Yes, it refers to pure, high-character companions. In the blueprint of this sustainable society, it signifies an environment based on total intellectual and moral equality.
It envisions a society where you are surrounded by peers of profound integrity.
Individuals who are actively intellectually engaged in maintaining this equitable system alongside you. It is the ultimate manifestation of intellectual and social companionship.
So, when you synthesize all of these decoded elements, the universal, uninterrupted flow of resources, the baseline of permanent psychological security, the unceasing economic sustainability, and the high-character intellectual companionship, you arrive at a staggering conclusion.
You really do.
Jannah is not some magical resort you travel to after you die to drink milk from a literal river. It is the mathematical, inevitable output of a perfectly balanced, sustainable, equitable society. It's the blueprint for heaven on earth, achieved purely through the rigorous application of social physics and natural law.
It is the ultimate culmination of the Tayyib tree. When the internal data recorders of our actions, our makafati amal, align perfectly with the universal laws of equity, this closed-loop system is not a miracle. It is the natural, inevitable result.
Well, we have covered incredible foundational ground today. I mean, we started by examining the arrogant laughter of the mockers.
There's elite power brokers.
Right, sitting in their uncoupled train cars, coasting on the residual momentum of a dying system, just completely blind to their impending mathematical halt. Then we transitioned into the internal engine of reason, realizing that we are not being monitored by an external police officer.
No winged accountants.
Right. Rather, we are our own inescapable data recorders, permanently logging every private action into the neural and social bedrock of our reality. We watched the environmental stress test completely shatter the Kabbath tree, exposing the exhaustion of a society that hoards its wealth until it paralyzes its own forward movement.
The crisis of velocity.
And finally, we decoded the mithal, the allegory, arriving at this stunning blueprint for a mathematically sustainable, closed-loop society built on universal resource access and psychological security.
This represents a monumental paradigm shift. It forces a transition from being passive observers waiting for some mythical external rescue to becoming active participants who bear the responsibility of constructing a sustainable system aligned with natural law.
Which is huge.
It is. However, this realization introduces a profound, lingering inquiry.
It leaves us standing at the edge of a massive practical cliff.
If the fruit of this Tayyib system, this universal security and unbroken sustainability, is the ultimate proof of its truth, how does a society actually go about building it?
How do we do it?
How do we transition from understanding the theory of social physics to physically laying the infrastructure of this closed-loop economy? And crucially, how does the Quran address the very nature of the book that contains these blueprints?
That is the exact friction we are going to explore next. We're going to take this theoretical blueprint off the drafting table and examine how it is meant to be forged in the harsh fire of human reality by looking at what the text calls the evidence of history and the witness of law.
It is the necessary bridge between diagnosis and implementation.
But before we conclude today's analysis, I want to leave you listening with a deeply personal, provocative question. I want you to look closely at the structures you participate in every single day. Look at the company you work for, the economic community you live in, and the reality of your own private actions. Based on the internal data you are recording into your own psychological ledger right now, are you actively planting roots in the bedrock of permanent sustainable values? Are you contributing to the flow of a closed-loop, equitable system?
Right.
Or are you just sitting comfortably in an uncoupled train car, coasting on borrowed momentum, arrogantly waiting for the tracks to run out? Think about it. See you next time.